Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Jon-Eric Sullivan, new general manager of your Miami Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network, special thank you to each and every one of you who tune in. You've helped make the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. The wild card round is here. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Speak good things, and they shall appear. We're popping a C4 here on a Friday. It's too early for a celebratory anything else. So I'm going to have a breakfast cereal flavored C4 to celebrate. Jon-Eric Sullivan is the choice at general manager for the Dolphins. And there's a lot of layers to this decision that it made it really fascinating with the way the week started, with the way the middle of the week with the John Harbaugh development happened, with the way the Mike McDaniel dismissal happened, and now this hire. I think the thing that stands out the most to me, that I'm most excited about, because you could have told me, I think Chad Alexander has a very admirable resume. I think he has a great chance to be a great executive someday. I'd have been excited about that hire, and you would read between the lines and kind of see the writing on the wall for what they were aspiring to do with the head coach position. This, and I believe Omar Kelly made this point, your team culture starts with the folks at the top, right? And your general manager, who's responsible for personnel and decisions on players you're bringing into your building and setting the temperature for what kind of players you're seeking and looking for, this hire sets that tone. This hire, and it had been reported throughout the entire process, the Dolphins are looking for a scout, right? They're looking for a team builder, a guy with a long time experience of talent identification. And he comes from a place in Green Bay that's got GMs across the league and Hall of Fame executives that were the guys that he came up underneath and amongst and learned, Jon-Eric Sullivan. But the thing that impressed me the most was Stephen Ross didn't do the thing, which is shiny object, right? Like John Harbaugh shows up. You've had 2 months of prep to explore who you thought was the best candidate pool for executives. And throughout that entire 2-month prep, we'd heard, oh, they want to move fast. They want to move quickly. They want to make a decision. They have this head start. They want to fill this vacancy. They want to get this thing rolling. Then they come out to shoot real aggressive 6 interview requests the first day of the league offseason. On Monday, they do 2 days of virtual interviews. They have 2 days of in-person interviews. Day 5, this might be the fastest general manager vacancy filling in the history of mankind. I don't remember a time in which you had 2 rounds of interviews and made the decision by January 9th to make the hire. It's moved very quickly. But the John Harbaugh development didn't distract the goldfish, right? It would have been very easy. Chad Alexander wasn't on the original offer list for interviews. He didn't get an initial request. He got it the day after, and he got it a few hours before John Harbaugh was officially dismissed by the Ravens. You could tell it was due process. We need to add and explore this. But the pursuit of a big fish, a John Harbaugh, with all the connections to Stephen Ross, the pursuit of that, and I would have been in full. I made the show on Wednesday. I was in full support. And, at the time, you had a head coach in Mike McDaniel. You were interviewing all these other executives. If they chose to go down that path, I would have completely got it. And I think you'd be justified if you did. And I still believe they should still shoot their shot with John Harbaugh. But to compromise your GM prep for 2 months, to take the guy who was the late add-on to the list that very clearly was not a part of your original top-of-mind interviews that you wanted to have, and to stay to that 2-month process and have the conviction in that prep time that all the reporting that led up to the vacancy pursuit to hire being made was they want a scout. They want a team builder. They want a guy that's really going to be strong in the draft. They want a guy that knows how to identify talent. All of those qualifications pointed you directly at Jon-Eric Sullivan. All of them. And you didn't let the pursuit, the thrill of the pursuit, and taking the shortcut to feel like what would have given you the best chance to close this potential big fish, you didn't let that distract you from what you invested all of your time in. And I felt like Jon-Eric Sullivan, I did the hot board in November for A to Z Sports. Number 1 on the list was Jon-Eric Sullivan. This is my guy. So y'all can point and laugh at me if this doesn't work. But I'm fired up right now because I think this was good process in how you prepared for the moment. And then what you did when the moment happened and then a shiny object appeared out in the peripheral. Were you going to cut corners? Were you going to try to make the splashy hire? Or when you as ownership promised the fan base that the team is going to get comprehensive change because it needs comprehensive change? You meet that moment by hiring somebody who's qualified to give it instead of taking the shortcut to what feels like a sexy, splashy hire that I think everybody would have been excited about and would still be excited about. I don't want to totally dismiss the idea of John Harbaugh not coming to the Dolphins. I don't think this puts you in the driver's seat for that at this stage. But Jon-Eric Sullivan's got some great connections from a coaching staff perspective. We're going to get a little bit into that. We're going to do some quotes from Brian Gutekunst, the general manager of the Packers, who's worked with Jon-Eric since Jon-Eric came into the Packers in 1999? 2001, whatever it was. We're going to get into that next here, Locked on Dolphins, live on YouTube, listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Another exciting show here as we end this first week of the offseason. It's a great tone setter for the months ahead and what that means for the Dolphins, right? It's like, just when you think we hit a new low, they suck us back in, right? With a hire like this, it's got me back in. I don't know if you could tell, but we got a lot more to get to here on the show. Make sure you guys stick with us. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not just you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets change the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You are no longer just a spectator, play-by-play. You decide. Play every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. So let's talk about a couple of quotes from Brian Gutekunst, the Packers general manager, about Jon-Eric Sullivan. Some of this ties back to when he was doing interviews last year. He interviewed for several vacancies in last year's cycle, did not land for whatever reason, be that situation, be that for timing, be that for resources. And I think that's where for Miami, everybody kind of understands what 2026 is and is not going to be. It's going to be a pivot year. It's going to be a foundation set year. But once you get past kind of the warts of the 2026 cap situation from a dead cap perspective, there's young players on the roster. There's some young players on the roster. There's some players that I think Jon-Eric Sullivan, with his experience the last however long with Matt LaFleur as the head coach of the football team. There is some scheme parallels there that I think a guy like Eric Sullivan is going to understand what kind of coaching staff and what kind of head coach and what kind of scheme we can run and how to optimize some of those players and pieces that are in place to get the best version of a roster out on the field. Here's what Brian Gutekunst had to say last year in talking about Jon-Eric Sullivan and his prospective general manager candidacy for other teams. I can't imagine a better candidate out there. I'm certainly very, very biased, but whoever gives him an opportunity, he's going to do an outstanding job. He's really impacted our organization in so many different ways. He will be missed, but we have a lot of guys that we think are ready to move into that space if that's the case. Selfishly, I'd love for him to be back. He's 100% ready for the opportunity. I'm excited for him. The fact is, he's not afraid to tell me something uncomfortable. If you think you're going to go down for a different thing, for me, that's important. I got a lot of guys in that room that aren't afraid to do that. But for me, decisions I have to make that are under my umbrella, guys like Jon-Eric make me very, very confident because I have those guys by my side when I make those decisions. They're involved in everything, give me a lot of confidence in the work that we've done. It's the right decision when the time comes to make those decisions. So I do want to take the moment to look at the Packers' recent draft history and acknowledge what, this is Jon-Eric Sullivan's on the record talking about the lifeblood of a franchise is the NFL draft because it's 4 or 5 years of stability, 3 to 5 years of stability, depending on like where you get picked or UDFA or your first round pick with the 5th year option. This is where you set security and stability with your roster when you hit these players. So the 25 class, it's obviously a little early. These guys have played 17 games. They're getting ready to play in the wild card round tomorrow in Chicago. It's Matthew Golden in the first round. It's the first time in like 20-something years they picked a wide receiver in the first round. Anthony Belton, offensive lineman, ended up playing some meaningful snaps of him. Some people felt he was a tackle versus a guard. He was a tackle at NC State. Another wide receiver, Savion Williams, Barron Sorrell, Colin Oliver, Warren Brinson, who's been like a nice day 3 hit for them out of Georgia. He was 198 overall. Micah Robinson and John Williams was their draft class last year. But you go to 24, Jordan Morgan in the first round, offensive lineman. So you already have, in the last 2 years, you've got 2 offensive linemen in the top 55. A rush linebacker hybrid, very dynamic space player in Edge Cooper, Javon Bullard. Those are both second-round picks for Green Bay. You get into some of the day 3 hits and impact players that they had. Safety Evan Williams had an impact. I really like Kitano Oladapo out of Oregon State as a 5th-round pick. The year before that, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, Dontavian Wicks, Carl Brooks in the 6th round. The year before that, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, Christian Watson, Sean Ryan, Romeo Dobbs, Zach Tom in the 4th round. Kingsley Enagbari's playing meaningful snaps for them. Rasheed Walker's been a starting left tackle. They got him in the 7th round. Down to 2021, and it's not a super sexy class. Eric Stokes took a while to get his career figured out, and it didn't really happen in Green Bay, but Josh Myers was a 4-year starter for them at center. To Daryl Slayton on the defensive line. Cole Van Lannon just got a $50 million contract in Jacksonville. Now you got to choose who to pay, right? And as a 6th-round guy, it really was the second half of this season that got Van Lannon that contract. But a player that ends up hitting like that, Isaiah McDuffie. And that's before you get to the year before that with Jordan Love, where they were kind of proactive. They got a quarterback in the 20s that they developed appropriately. John Runyon they got in the 6th round. He was a 4-year starter, got like a $10 million a year contract from the New York Giants in free agency. Elgton Jenkins at 44 in 2019. So there are hits and misses just like you would expect with any draft resume. But you go through since the Dolphins build, right? That's since 2019. If I go through the definitive draft hits for Green Bay, Rashawn Gary, Elgton Jenkins, Jordan Love, John Runyon, Josh Myers, Tadaro Slayton, Cole Van Lannon, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, Kingsley Enagbari, Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, who's one of the 5 best tight ends in football, Dontavian Wicks, Carl Brooks. Assuming these guys are contextual hits as day 3 draft selections that they made. Rasheed Walker's in that group. Jordan Morgan, Edge Cooper. You got a really impressive nucleus of successfully drafted and targeted talent based on what you're looking for. There's a lot of trench play here, and they've spent a lot of their early draft capital, and this is kind of like a Gutekunst thing, and as a whole, as he's kind of had the book written on him. It was such a big deal the last years they went offensive players in the first round because the vast majority, if they didn't go quarterback, it was corner, linebacker, defensive back, linebacker, rush hybrid player, defensive tackle Kenny Clark, safety, another safety with Clinton Dix. Now you're back to like 2014. Dayton Jones, another defensive end. Nick Perry, another pass rusher. They've got like a 15-year sample size. It's a lot of defensive premier positions and then quarterback. And then the last 2 years they've gone offense. It's kind of they've been breaking the mold a little bit. But that's the school of thought in the draft that you should probably expect to see when the Dolphins are in a foundational window to build the foundation of a roster up. Wouldn't dismiss anything. Wouldn't dismiss an offensive lineman with the contract situation of James Daniels and Austin Jackson. Wouldn't dismiss an edge rusher because of the situation that exists with what's Bradley Chubb going to be here and Chop Robinson. Like, what do we have with Chop Robinson right now? We don't know. Could be a corner. Could be a safety. Like, if Caleb Downs is there, I would not be surprised in the least bit. So, very impressive track record in Green Bay with the draft selections, and not just the early hits. It's the names like Warren Brinson in the 6th round and Evan Williams in the 4th round and Carl Brooks and Dontavian Wicks in the 6th and 5th round, respectively, and Zach Tom and Kingsley Anywhere. These are all day 3 picks. And some of the Dolphins issue, I mean, they got really good returns on this year's day 3 group, but reflect on the past 5 years. They didn't have any picks to make. They used them as pot sweeteners for splash trades. That departure is a big part of the reason why I look at the track record of this executive and the team that he's been with and the way that he talks, and it should make you excited because it sets the stage for we're not going to take shortcuts. The shortcut would have been either keeping Mike McDaniel and retrofitting the GM to Mike McDaniel, or the shortcut would have been, hey, we think this guy gives us the fastest inside track to John Harbaugh. And like, I'd have respected it if you did it. And I still hope they do make the full court press for John Harbaugh, but that means you don't throw out the process of your executive search. Because this is your, like, even if you get John Harbaugh at this stage, John Harbaugh is 63 years old. Maybe he's got 10 years left, and I'm not going to thumb my nose at 10 years because the Dolphins haven't had a coach since Dave Wannstedt that made it past 4. But this guy's got a lot of ball game left in him. And if he hits the way that I think he is capable of executing from a personnel standpoint, from a draft standpoint, from a roster philosophy standpoint, that is there's a strong conviction in what this team can be. That, to me, is the marquee hiring of the offseason. For now. Like, we can get into the conversation about what coaches are out there and what that coaching tree looks like with accessibility. We will do that next here on Locked On Dolphins, this emergency podcast, Jon-Eric Sullivan hire episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I got more coming your way, some coaching candidates to know. We'll get into that next. Stick with us. Wildcard round is here. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action right now. Every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts. You can apply to bets you like most. You can open that profit boost pack first thing on game day, see what boosts you want to apply. Lets you play to your game day instincts, whether that's momentum, defense, quarterback, player, coaching. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of pigeonholing you into certain kinds of bets. Every play feels bigger with the profit boost packs, and the boosts make your bets feel all that much more exciting with that much more on the line, just like playoff football. Visit FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Let's be real. Managing your finances can be overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot you had, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you are losing control. Who has time to track every transaction and hunt down hidden fees? It's where Rocket Money comes in, a personal finance app that helps you take control of your finances. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I love that it tracks all your subscriptions. You can cancel them right there in the app. You know how hard they make it for you to go through and do the click-through rate, and then they miscolor the button so that you think you're hitting yes, I want to cancel, but it says, no, never mind, I don't actually want to cancel. You take all that noise out with Rocket Money. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. I popped this C4 at the start of the show. I'm 21 minutes in. I haven't had a sip yet. So you guys are going to have to give me a minute here to catch my breath. I don't know. Maybe some of you everydayers have probably picked up on this, but when I get excited, the default setting is just I talk on like 1.5 speed. And I know there are people that listen to podcasts out there that 1.5 speed, like that's the default setting. So bless you getting into a show like this where we're just off the rip the whole time. So let me know what that listening experience is like for you. But yesterday I wrote it for both Chad Alexander and I wrote it for Jon-Eric Sullivan. And it was 4 head coaching candidates the Dolphins could tap into if A or B is the hire in Miami. And now we know it's Jon-Eric Sullivan. So I want to read through the 4 coaching candidates that I think have obvious low-hanging fruit connections to Jon-Eric Sullivan. And I want you to know I am not exclusively presenting this as the only 4 head coaches I think the Dolphins should consider. I'm not endorsing all of these names. I'm saying these are the 4 names that have an obvious connection to Sullivan through his time in Green Bay. Okay? So please don't get mad when you hear name number 3. I'm not saying I would make this hire. I just want you to know who exists out there that is available for hire for a head coaching position who has overlapped with Jon-Eric Sullivan in Green Bay. The first one is Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Halfley, the current defensive coordinator. Former head coach at Boston College. He cut his teeth as a secondaries coach in the NFL. He was in Cleveland and Tampa and San Francisco, and then he was the co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State. And then he takes the BC head coaching job, and he leaves because NIL starts becoming the wild, wild west. And he said, I just want to coach football. So then he leaves. In the last 2 years, he's been the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. Very well-respected mind. I like that he has head coaching experience. This would be on the early short list as far as like predictively who I think we will get the interview hires for Miami. I would expect Jeff Halfley to be on the list. I think he's got good command at the podium as far as the way that he talks. He's engaging. He speaks intelligently and presents like you could see the football intellect that comes through in the way that he talks. And with former head coaching experience, be it at Boston College, and I know that's not the NFL, I have very little questions about like, oh, is there going to be a drop-off in X, Y, or Z because now he has to be a head coach? Because those college coaches, they're going to do all that recruiting mess. And Halfley said, I don't want to do any of that noise. I just want to coach. I just want to deal with ball. So I don't think the head coach element of an elevation from Jeff Halfley as a defense coordinator in Green Bay to Miami would be something I would be concerned about. Now, there are concerns and questions, but that's for another show. Because I want to talk to you about our next name on the short list, and it's a name that Dolphins fans should know if you watched Hard Knocks in 2023. Anthony Campanile, the current Jacksonville Jaguars defensive coordinator. That team is prospering on pressure and turnovers. Campanile's kind of got like this rabid dog mix of Brian Flores pressure style and simulated pressure. He was a Michigan linebackers coach at Michigan. With like, so there's like encounters with like the scheme that Jesse Minter would go on to run, and he's with the Chargers. And obviously the time under Brian Flores, he was with Miami from 2020 to 2023. There's some Vic Fangio flavor in there. It's a pretty fun scheme. you know what the temperature's like in that room, because if you watched Hard Knocks and you watched him and the speech that he gave in front of the team and the intensity that he brings, there's certainly an edge to Anthony Campanile, and you see that when you watch his defense in Jacksonville play. So he was with Miami through 23. He was under consideration for the defensive coordinator job in 24. That ends up going to Anthony Weaver because the Dolphins had to run in with the Mike McDonald defense in week 17 and all the sim pressure stuff, and that really caught Mike McDaniel's attention. So they go with Anthony Weaver off of that staff. Campanile leaves to go to Green Bay and becomes the linebackers coach there, and then after 1 year gets hired in Jacksonville's defensive coordinator. So he's kind of got some flavoring. The only overlap he has with Jon-Eric Sullivan is last year in Green Bay. But there is a year of existence and a year for scouting for players that fit into kind of what Campanile has applied some of to go work in Jacksonville. The third name is what's that name about, like, or that meme of the guy and he's leaning on the door frame and he's talking to the other girl and he says the exact same thing, but one guy's like really handsome and the other guy's not, and the girl's response is like, "Oh, that's so sweet," and then the other box is like human resources, and it's like the other version of that meme for John Harbaugh is Mike McCarthy because their resumes from a win-loss perspective, a winning percentage perspective, the number of years in the league perspective, they both have one Super Bowl title, and both of them were more than 10 years ago. Like, their resumes, you just put it on paper, you look at them, and the numbers are comparable. But everybody sees John Harbaugh's available for hire, and it's, "Oh, that's so sweet." And then you see Mike McCarthy's also available, and it's human resources. But Mike McCarthy, I don't think you can dismiss as a potential, like, stabilizing candidate as a coach. Is he a sexy hire? No. Would he be like on my top 3 wish list of coaches I would want to see the Dolphins hire? No. But he was in Green Bay for 13 years with a record of 125, 77, and 2. And he won a Super Bowl in 2010 in Green Bay. He had the 5-year stint in Dallas. He won 49 games in 5 years in Dallas. And he had a sabbatical year this past year in 2025. He's not John Harbaugh, but he's got 6 less wins and the same number of Super Bowl trophies. Well-regarded offensive scheme. Right there, let's not forget, McCarthy was the guy who actually called plays for the offense that Stephen Ross was hoping he was going to get when he hired Joe Philbin to be the head coach of the team in 2012. I'm not saying you should make the hire, but he averages almost just short of 10 wins a season in 2 separate places on 5+ year sample size in both spots. I would expect the Dolphins to have an interview request. I would at least like to see that. Now, again, not on my particular short list. One name that would be on my particular short list, but it's somewhat dependent on what happens this weekend. It's also somewhat dependent on like a galaxy brain. But I do want to throw the name Matt LaFleur out there. LaFleur, there was a quote from Adam Schefter about the contract status of Matt LaFleur. And he said, it's hard to justify any type of extension for... No, that's not a Schefter quote, excuse me. That's from Wendell Ferreira of A to Z Sports, Green Bay. I took a snippet off of a story that he wrote, but this is a Packers beat. He's on the Packers beat. LaFleur's looking for a new contract extension. He's going into the last year of his deal in 2026. Jay Glazer on the Fox pregame show going into Week 18 talked about Matt LaFleur is kind of in wait-and-see mode as far as like what's going to happen there. They're changing their front office structure. The head coach, I guess, is now reportedly going to be reporting directly to the general manager instead of to the CEO. They had a CEO change this past year. So it sounds like there's some kind of strife and friction, and they're trying to figure out what, like, negotiate a contract. But the Packers, like, it's super cool to be a publicly owned and traded franchise until you got to throw millions of dollars. That's not private equity money, right? So there's some price, there's some politics. That sounds like it could not be resolved. Now, and again, things would have to break dramatically in the Dolphins' fashion, and then presumably they would have to do the thing where they would trade for a coach. I'm not advocating for that to happen, but I do think it has to be considered in the realm of possibility based on what the reporting has been like in the last 6 days about Matt LaFleur and his status as the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. Now, there's other coaches that are not like, oh, they were in Green Bay for X, Y, and Z years that I'd be very interested in. That is, of course, the next stage for the Dolphins. That's the next thing that we are going to get into here on the show, over at A to Z Sports, on Touchdown Miami, like all the places I'm at. Now that the GM hiring is done with Jon-Eric Sullivan, we're going to turn a lot of our attention to head coaching candidates, to a head coaching hot board across all connections. And it will include these names that were connected in Green Bay, but not exclusively, because I think there's some very attractive candidates that can exist elsewhere in the space and elsewhere in the sphere to kind of double down on the comprehensive change that Stephen Ross is hoping to bring to the Dolphins, and took a great first step in with the hiring of Jon-Eric Sullivan. That's going to do it for me here on today's episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. It's great to be on with you. If you're tuning in live on YouTube, if you are listening after the fact on your podcast feed, love each and every one of you. Excited for an offseason in which we can really explore together what can be different and how the Dolphins are going to go about trying to be different in 2026 and beyond. That's going to do it for me. I'm out of here. Cock Raps, fins up. Keep it locked in, Locked On Dolphins. I'll talk to you all again soon.